You're listening to Off the Court, a show dedicated to making you the best version of yourself as an athlete and as a person. I'm Coach Jack, CEO and owner of Kincaid Hughes. If you want to take your life and game to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's get it. What up, gatekeepers? Back at you with another episode that I'm extremely excited to show you. Today, I have a guest. His name is Kincaid Hughes, and he's actually one of my best friends that I met from college that I had no prior knowledge of knowing until the day I showed up at UW River Falls. And Kincaid's a great reminder of me. I demand and ask a lot out of my students, and Kincaid does a great job of bringing me back down to earth and into perspective. A lot of what I do is I try to demand the best out of people, and sometimes that can be too demanding. And I'll always talk to Kincaid when he's asking me for advice, and we're just going in deep talks about life. And he's like, you know what, Jack? Sometimes I kind of just want to be average, right? He wants that normal life of just raising a family in a small town, no big fancy house or cars. None of that matters to him. He just wants to have kids and just be a great father. And that's something I forget. And I'm always just working to try and become that best person and bring that best person out of everyone else. But at the end of the day, what matters is your content and happiness with whatever you're doing. So, and let me tell you, yes, this kid, he's still, he's a sophomore in college. So yes, he's your typical sophomore kid in college, but he is one of the nicest people you will ever meet. And he has one of those natural instincts of true empathy for people. So he's a great listener, which is something that my father had a great asset to, is he could sit there, never meet a person, or he's never seen this person before in his life, and he'll sit there for 3 hours if this person's willing to talk about themselves, which I honestly think is his greatest gift. Before we dive into the meat and potatoes, Kincaid, if you have not checked out our shooting program, I strongly urge you to do so. CTG Shooting Academy, it's the perfect blend of the knowledge, the drills, and the mindset necessary to become an elite shooter. If you're trying to take your game in person to the next level, make sure you've listened to all the CTG Off the Court podcast episodes and follow us on all social media platforms at CTG Hoops. If you ever have any questions about anything or need advice, don't be afraid to reach out to anyone on the CTG team, either me, Coach Jack, Coach Aaron, Coach Connor, or Isaac, our film guy. Our CTG fam is continuing to grow, and us four are really excited for the growth and future of Close the Gate. So, Kincaid, thank you for joining me today.
Yes, of course.
Oh, this is going to be fun. All right, so a big reason why I wanted to talk to Kincaid on this podcast is he's from a very small town. Where'd you live again?
I lived in Amory, Wisconsin, but I went to high school in Clear Lake, Wisconsin.
What division were you?
They're Division 5 for basketball and Division 7 for football, so the smallest divisions. I graduated with 38 kids in a class.
So some people might be able to relate to this small town feeling, but I bet the majority of listeners are from the city of Janesville, Wisconsin, which is like 60,000 people. So that's a fairly big town. And not many people really understand what life's like with a population. What's your
1,000
people?
Yep.
So
in
that's
the town of Clear Lake.
1/60th of Janesville. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I wanted you to talk a little bit about what living in a small town's kind of like, and what it's taught you, and kind of what were your sports experience like when how many kids are in your class?
So there's 38 kids, obviously. So I think the biggest difference between bigger school athletes and smaller school athletes so if you're an athlete in a small school, you play 3 sports. It's kind of just a known fact. I was lucky enough, I played basketball, track, and football. So coming from a small school, everyone knows everyone, obviously. So the community really comes behind the team, obviously, because that's a big investment in their time. They want to look at their high school sports, and a lot of parents that are teaching or their kids are playing in sports, they went to Clear Lake High School, so they're alumni. So obviously they're very invested in that.
Is that your plan to stay in Clear Lake?
No,
or-
it is not my plan. I do want to live in maybe a smaller town, but I really do like that small town feel. But my parents have always said sometimes they want me to get out of Clear Lake, and I'm lucky enough to go to UW River Falls and meet lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds, and that's one thing that I really like to do is meet other people with lots of different backgrounds.
Like, that's probably, in terms of myself, one of the best decisions I've ever made was going to River Falls, because going to Janesville to River Falls, not many people do that.
Yeah.
It's not one of those common Wisconsin schools that everyone goes to. So I took a leap of faith, and I went to that school knowing absolutely nobody. Mm-hmm. And then I met you. And it's been a wild ride, but we became best friends instantly. I think I remember the first day we met, we already started hanging out. Like,
yeah, just like we were best friends. It was just so natural. Another thing with college buddies is once you meet someone, it's just so natural. You're always together, and you get to spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah, if any of you listeners are getting ready to go to college and you're worried about who you might know there and who you might not, definitely go towards the growth of your person by meeting new people. You don't want to go to college with a roommate that you're already best friends with, because you're already limited to the growth amount of people that you're going to reach. Because if you meet a new kid, then you're already like obligated to introduce him to your other best buddy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, I think 4 kids from my high school went to River Falls, and one of my actual best friends from high school goes to River Falls, and we still talk from time to time. But I think the biggest and most proudest moment I have is that I've met all my best friends at college. I never knew of them even at all at college or in high school or anything like that. So I think that's one of the biggest things I like to talk about with Jack. I met him probably little over a year ago, and now we're best friends. And I'll always be best friends with him, so it's a big thing.
The reason our relationship is so good, obviously, I didn't go to River Fall this year, so I haven't been with all my buddies, but when Kincaid or any of my other buddies like Jake or Spencer, whenever I see them, it's like we picked up right where we just left off. You know what I mean? It's not like you were a bad friend because you missed the last 2 months of my life. You know what I mean? Those are kind of those toxic friendships. If you can see one of your best buddies like 5 months later and it's like, boom, instantly you pick up where you left off, those are the best types of friendships. And one of the things, Kincaid, that you remind of me is obviously in basketball, some people are gifted athletically more than others. And there's a lot of things that trickle down because of that. But we're not going to say you're gifted athletically, but you are definitely gifted socially. And I actually do. Sometimes I'll just sit there and watch you talk to try and pick up on what you're so good at. What do you think you do well? Because you're good at talking to people. Like, that's your greatest strength.
I would say that's my biggest strength, yeah.
What would you give tips for the listeners to improve their social skills to talk to anybody from any age?
I would say just be confident in what you're saying. Even if they might not know what you're talking about, you have to be confident in what you're saying. Also, the biggest thing coming from a small town, a lot of kids are very closed-minded. A lot of kids are going to live there the rest of their life, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think traveling really helped, talking to other people from different backgrounds. Just make sure you listen is the biggest thing. To be a good talker, you have to be able to listen and get to know people.
So have you ever read How to Win Friends and Influence People?
I have not.
Well, you're a textbook of the prototype of that book, because the first principle of that book is to just listen, because nothing excites a person more than their own ego. All they want to do is talk about themselves. So if you're a great listener, the person that's talking about themselves constantly is like, wow, this guy's really cool. He lets me talk about myself for hours and hours.
Yeah.
And that's something you're really good at. So listeners, if you're ever trying to get something out of someone, like if you want someone to do something for you, just listen to them talk about themselves. And I think that that's the biggest secret to gaining a lot of things throughout your life, whether it's with your boss or your coworker, teammate, things of that nature. So that's really good. So you love talking about high school sports. So
sometimes.
Sometimes. When I met this kid, all they would talk about is their small town high school sports. And it sounds fun because you definitely won a lot more than my high school sports experience. We obviously have more competition, but talk about what high school basketball taught you and what it was like playing for Clear Lake, who was in a Division 5 school. And you guys definitely weren't bad. You had a ton of skilled players. I just think the lower divisions are definitely disrespected because they're like, wow, they got 1,000 people. There's no way they have that much competition.
Yeah, I think coming from a small school and playing sports, and not only basketball, probably basketball was our best sport, but when you grow up with kids, I was playing basketball with the same 5 kids that were in my grade since second grade. And I think chemistry on and off the court is a huge thing, and being friends off the court is a big thing. You don't need to be best friends with your teammates, but you definitely need to get along. And we really didn't have a choice when there's 38 kids and 5 of them are guys playing basketball.
That's a great point.
And I was lucky enough to play with my twin brother. He's a senior and played all the same sports, so I think that was really cool. And I don't know if we would have gotten to do that in a bigger school. We probably only would have played one sport, and who knows if we would have even gotten to play.
So, listeners, yeah, Kincaid and Croy. Croy's the other twin. I like to call Kincaid Croy Jr. because Croy is by far the superior twin. Shout out to Croy. But, yeah, the twins are a fan favorite from whoever they've meeten because they're genuine people. But that's such a good point about the chemistry thing. You were forced to hang out with them.
Yeah, exactly.
See, what happens with bigger schools is you'll have like 10 kids in 10 different friend groups. And so they don't gain this bond off the court. Like you got to go to war with someone knowing they got your back. You know what I mean? So that's a great point that I didn't even think about.
If you wanted one thing for your students to learn from, what would it be? So not basketball, just in life. I know you're a huge believer in talking about not only basketball, but off the court, being a great person off the court. That's your main goal.
So the biggest thing that I've experienced is, and I just made a t-shirt about this, and that's chasing and craving failure. And that's a misconception that the majority of people miss out on. They see failure and they think that they have to probably turn a different direction. If you actually love failure and realize like this is only going to make me better, like, and you actually want it, there's a huge difference than being okay with failure, but actually wanting failure is a huge difference. And just with all things of life, and that's how I'm with this business. I go one route. I'm trying to make a website this way. It doesn't work. Good. That's going to make me learn more things. Stocks. This didn't work out. I lost a bunch of money. Therefore, I'm going to make more money in the future from learning that one set of failure. You know what I mean? Like, if you crave failure constantly, your potential growth as a human being is insane. So my kids know that. That's like the number one thing that I ingrain in their brain. And the second thing is perception is reality. Kincaid is doing an absolutely fantastic job right now on the podcast. And before this, he's like, dude, we're not even going to be able to post this. This is going to be terrible. And this is going to be a great episode, I can tell already. You're doing a great job, Kincaid, but that little piece of doubt, for normal people, like you have great genetics with social ability, so you can talk on this podcast easy. But if you tell yourself you're not going to be able to do something, most of the time you're not going to be able to do it. Yeah. So the view and perception of what you're thinking about doing or striving for needs to be in a positive light. So those are probably the two biggest things that I ingrain in my students' brain.
Well, and that's kind of the never give up attitude and working hard, and that's a great thing. When you teach kids when they're younger, obviously you're working with all ages, but with the brain, it's when you teach kids when they're younger, that's what they're going to take on throughout their life, and I think that never give up attitude is a huge thing.
But like schools ingrained in most people's mind that failure is bad, like right away. And by no means, kids.
F is for failure.
Yeah, by no means, kids, am I saying go out and fail your test. But a huge problem I had in school, it's ridiculous the amount of intelligence I have now compared to when I was in like organized school, in high school and elementary school, because all I cared about was that grade. You know, I had a great GPA. I had like a 3.95. But let me tell you, I was not that smart. Okay, because all I did was cram in studying for that one test, get a good grade, and then forget everything I just learned. Yeah. I'd way rather you get a worse grade on something, but actually take away from what you learned. Worry more about your intelligence than the actual grade that you're getting. And I think that's the reason people don't like failure, is because schools, put it into their brain in the first place that you can't fail. That's bad. You're not going to be successful if you fail. And we're going to see more and more of these college dropouts become a huge deal, because I think people are starting to realize you can literally learn everything on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And if you're teaching yourself these things, you're obviously going to retain more information than a college professor pushing geography on you when I could care less about rocks. I'm trying to run a basketball program. Why do I need to know this? Things of that nature.
Yeah, that's a great point. In high school, I did the exact same thing. My parents are both teachers, so obviously I needed to get good grades. But even now they're saying that if you don't get the best grade in geography, you get a C, but you're getting A's in your business class, that's a good thing. But if you're getting an A in your business class and you're not learning anything, that's a terrible thing, because when you get to your job, you can't bring that knowledge. You're going to have to learn everything over again.
So I'm reading Think or Grow Rich right now. I can't remember the author, famous author. Mm-hmm. But he was talking about the definition of education. And see, people were starting to figure this out years and years ago, but it's this preconceived notion that the majority of people are right. If the majority of people are saying one thing, then that means that you're in the average consumption of whatever they're trying to teach. So what I mean by that is normally the minority, if you give a reasoning for whatever you're trying to talk about, is the right way, because most people don't think that way. Mm-hmm. You have to think outside of what 99% of the average think to truly be successful. Mm-hmm. And where I was going to run with that, the book, Think or Grow Rich, he talked about what education actually means, and it's derived from a Latin word called educo. But it's mainly about, it's not generalized knowledge. And that's all school is. It's generalized knowledge, mm-hmm. and it doesn't teach you how to use it. Yeah, you learn what it is, but they don't show you how to use it with experience. And that's why most people say, I shouldn't say most, that's why I believe experience is the fastest way to growth in intelligence.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you with that, because when you, just like basketball, when you start practicing and you get experience, you're obviously going to get better. It's the same thing with CTG, and you even talked about the podcast. First time you guys did it, you had no idea what you were doing, and now you're smooth with it, and I can see that you're doing a lot better with that.
Mm-hmm. That's honestly one of my goals later on in life. Obviously, once we get CTG absolutely everywhere, is I would want to build a school of some sorts that's focused mainly on, obviously you want their generalized education, but it shows them how to use it more and how to acquire knowledge and turn it into experience for faster growth. You know what I mean? Because there has definitely got to be a better way than what we're doing for school right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm 100% with that. My parents are both teachers. They're both English teachers at Clear Lake, and my dad's about to retire this year, so shout out to Kincaid Hughes. But his biggest thing he loves is talking to kids about their careers. Mm-hmm. Not even being an English teacher. It's about he wants kids to succeed later on in life. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing. He knows not a lot of kids like English, but he wants them to succeed and do well and teach them work ethic. That's his biggest goal as a teacher.
That's what it's all about. That's why I stress so much on life skills with CTG. All these trainers out there, all they care about is looking cool, and they're more about impressing than actual improvement. Most kids, basketball, I'm sorry to tell you this, is going to cut off at 18 years old. Yep. Most kids. Okay. But if you learn all these life skills from CTG, you're going to be using this stuff you learn from a so-and-so called basketball training business that's going to take you way outside of your career and excel much farther. Which, man, that was a really good point. And by no means is it the teacher's fault right now with the education system.
No, absolutely not. No.
It's the structure. Think about it, of how much things have evolved. Think of even the phone, the use of the phone 10 years ago. It's insane what it is now. Okay, go back 100 years and look at how the classroom is set up. Mm-hmm. Exact same thing. Yep. Nothing has evolved. We have all these other things outside of us evolving, but here we sit with the education system and nothing has changed.
Yeah, and I think with CTG, the biggest difference with you is you're not only a basketball coach, you're a life coach. And I think that's a huge difference in the basketball training. All these trainers nowadays just want these kids to be good at basketball. They don't care what kind of person they are off the court. They just want to show off how good they are at basketball. You want to be able to say, hey, I coached this kid and look at how well he's doing. Look at how he turned out as a person, or she, as that matter.
And like the thing that's crazy about it with the life coaching is you truly don't know how measurable it is. And the certain phrases that people use, they could be using that still. They learned it when they're 10 years old and they could end up using it when they're 50 years old. You can't measure that, but you know, like, dang, I truly altered this kid's life. You know what I mean?
You not only alter those kids' lives, you alter their kids' lives, and they're going to pass that on. I mean, not all the information, obviously, but I can guarantee there's a couple lessons that you've taught them that they're going to pass on to their children. And I think there's no, like you said, there's no measure of that, but that's just a great accomplishment in itself.
And that gets to the first episode. I call it generational influence. And that's the reason why we're here, is being able to affect people generations down the line. Kids. You know what I mean?
What do you think the best quality in a student or person could be?
That's really good. Honestly, true empathy, probably. The ability to actually step outside of your ego and truly care about someone else. And this is a problem that I have with and I'm trying to turn into true, genuine compassion, because that's a trait that my dad had. Mm-hmm. And I want to believe it's not genetic, like it's not something in the brain. You can somehow teach it. Mm-hmm. But he had true care, like legit true care. See, I'm at a point where, yeah, I care a ton for all these other people, mm-hmm. but it's almost synthetic because all the reasoning comes back to making myself feel better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%.
By legit not caring about that aspect and just caring about that other person, that I think is the best thing a person can have.
And I think you hit the nail on the head with your dad. I mean, the first time I met your dad, you could tell the way he talked to people that he genuinely cared mm-hmm. about them.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a huge, like you said, I think that's the best trait anyone can have. It's not money, it's not fame, it's definitely empathy. If you care about other people, you're going to be a happier person in just the world, in the whole aspect of your life, I think.
100%. Yeah. And you have a little bit of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I try to be, everyone can always be better at that. I think that's one thing. Everyone can always be nicer and more empathetic and talking to people and not talking behind each other's back. But I think that's one thing I really try to pride myself on, is being nice to people genuinely.
But you have to do it that's not selfishly. You can't go, oh, I'm going to put a smile on someone's face today so it makes me feel better.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can't be that, because mm-hmm. then there's no true care.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that. You have to have true care for people. You have to care about their well-being and how happy they are, not to make yourself feel better, but for the other person to feel better.
And that's very difficult to do. Mm-hmm. So that's probably why I would say that's the best quality.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. What do you consider the biggest accomplishment since you have been running CTG?
The biggest accomplishment. One of the biggest accomplishments that I think I have is the unknown influence. I've had people randomly text me sometimes and they're like, dude, you have no idea how much you're affecting my life. You get me motivated. You get me wanting to do things. And I have random people that I don't even know who they are, and they're binging this podcast. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, dang, you know, that's some crazy influence. So that is definitely probably one of my greatest accomplishments is unknown influence. Like, I'm affecting people I have no idea who they are. Mm-hmm. And that's very powerful. And that's one reason I'm so obsessed with accelerating CTG's growth, because that number is only going to exponentially grow. Mm-hmm. The second biggest accomplishment I would say is hiring 3 of my best buddies.
Yeah, you texted me about that. That's really cool. Yeah,
we have already had a CTG meeting, and that was to see, because all of us were really into it, and that's extremely exciting because all 3 of them, I can tell they have a lot of care for it just as much as I did. And it's not just necessarily them taking the workload off me, is that they care about growing it as well. Because I think they can see that we can do a lot with this in terms of influencing people. And I wrote on the top of the whiteboard, mission, influence as many lives as possible. And obviously the short-term goal right now is to build a CTG facility, because then we're going to start getting more students in.
Be a lot easier to accelerate.
Exactly. And then we grow the business even bigger. But having us four sit down and talk about how to grow the business, that was pretty cool.
That was exciting.
Yeah.
I think the piggyback off your first statement about people that you didn't even know that were influenced by your company and the podcast and everything. And I think that ties back to sports. When I was in high school, some little kids would come up to me and just think I was just kids seeing, and they look up to you. That's the biggest thing, is kids looking up to you. That makes you appreciate what you're doing and makes you want to work harder because you're influencing those lives, and that's really cool.
Yeah, and we forget how much we looked up to those high school teams and stuff.
Yeah.
Bro, we used to think they were so good. And then you get to that point, you're like, wow, this is what it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a manager for the football team because my dad was a coach, and I just thought they were so cool and just larger-than-life characters. And my senior year, I remember, I'm like, wow, I remember looking up to these kids, and now I'm that kid. But it's one really cool thing is you can tie that into CTG. Yeah.
Do you want to do our quick speed round?
Yeah.
Dead or alive, who would you have dinner with?
That's a great question. I think I would have dinner with my grandpa because I did get to know him. I was lucky enough to know him until I think he died when I was 14, but it's one I would definitely want to have dinner with.
What would you say?
I would just ask him more about his life because I think I was more immature, obviously, when I was 14, but now I'm getting into the real world.
Next question. Why do you like the Vikings? How can you give reason to never winning a Super Bowl?
Okay, great question, Jack. I grew up loving the Vikings. My dad was he's an avid Viking fan, so I think he passed that on to me. And he always told me when I'd come home crying from elementary school in second grade, after all the Packer fans would make fun of me, that it builds character. So, and I'm gonna pass it on to my kids, and it's gonna build character for them.
Okay, no, don't pass it on to your kids. Okay. Let them be Packer fans.
No, never.
That is funny. He actually said that?
Yep.
That is awesome. Last question. What is the best piece of life advice someone has ever given you?
It's definitely something my dad said. I don't know if there was a single something he said, but a main point he always had for me was to work hard no matter what you do. Even if you don't like it, you need to work hard in it. No matter if it's sports, music, whatever you're doing, you should always work hard at something you love.
Yeah, that's good because it's contagious, right? If you work at something hard at something that you don't like to do, eventually that's going to tumble over to whatever your passion is. Got questions for me?
Yes, I do. What's one talent you wish you had?
Jumping ability. I mean, I'm not terribly unathletic, but yeah, I wish I could fly high because I think that would definitely be a separator for me.
That would be cool. Good point. If you didn't have CTG, what would you be doing right now?
I'd be a life coach. I'm sure I'd be an entrepreneur still. Like, I can't imagine. I love being my own boss. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think your dad instilled that in you?
For sure.
Okay.
He's been his own boss since day one. So I mean, like, if he's gonna do that, then I'm gonna do the same thing.
That's really cool. Last question here. If you could live anywhere, where would you live?
That's a good question. Honestly, if I didn't have any roots to America, I would go somewhere, Europe, maybe Australia. Like, if I didn't have something that I need to stay home for, I would love going somewhere else. That's something. Traveling is definitely something I'm going to do a lot of when I'm older. Mini vacations, they call it. Every at least once a month or something, you know. Go somewhere new. Yeah. That's definitely something I'll be doing. Awesome. Well, Kincaid, we'll definitely have to make a part 2. Was an interesting episode, but I think there's a lot of gems in here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, gatekeepers, for listening. Make sure you're staying up to date and have listened to every single podcast.
Please rate us on whatever platform you're listening to this on to be submitted into our Review of the Day contest. This is where we'll give you a shout out if you give us a review and we can talk about you on the podcast. The reviews will help whatever platform you're listening to it on reach a wider and global audience. That's what it's all about, trying to impact and influence as many lives as possible for the better. If you have been a part of Close the Gate and have been following along for our journey, do not be afraid to submit testimonials. They can be video or text. This will help others see how much true change Close the Gate can make in a life. We love as many questions as possible for new topics to talk about. Don't be afraid to reach out to me, Coach Jack, at jackhummel12@gmail.com or text me 608-201-7384. We want critique. Always strive for the better. You are never too good at something. You can always contact us about literally anything. We're always going to be here for you. Lastly, if you like this episode of Off the Court, please take a screenshot and share it with whatever social media platform you're on to be entered into a contest so that we can notice who's listening to this and whose lives we're impacting and if what we're giving you is what we want, because that's what it's all about. We're here to solve your problems, what your biggest desires and answers want to be. Thank you guys so much. Stay tuned. We're going to keep feeding you this free education and content. It's going to keep coming. We are not going to stop. I'm Coach Jack. Thanks for listening, Gatekeepers. I'm out.
Peace.
I'm out.
Peace.
I'm out.
Peace.
I'm out.
Peace.